Mayor of Victoria, Mr. Fortin.
Good morning.
Good morning. And we would like to find out a little more about the housing developments that you've been building for a while. I understand during the elections people were giving you some flack because they said they were not useful or they were not being used or something like that. What is the state of those two projects at the moment?
Well, these two projects were probably the things that we're most proud of under a whole homelessness initiative. That we've done a lot, housed more than 1,500 homeless people over the last 3 years. But what we did is we went out and we bought two of the Travelers Inns. There was a bankrupt chain of hotels, and there was an opportunity for the city to move quickly, to pick up these hotels and to use them to house the homeless, for those that are hard to house. Hotels that could be used for housing with supports.
So you're partly using them right now, but they're still under renovation?
Yeah, Queens Manor is under renovation, and the way we're going to do it is we're going to do 6 units at a time. And so as we finish, then the people down below will move up into the new renovated ones, and then we can renovate those. So, we didn't want to displace 36 people all at once onto the streets as we move forward.
Okay, so now the federal government is offering to help you with some money for the renovation. Can you tell us a little more about that money coming from the federal government?
Yeah, federal government through CMHC, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, is giving us money to do the renovation, and I think it's around $1.8 million. The way it's termed, though, it's termed as a forgivable loan, i.e. you take it, you renovate it, and if it stays as affordable housing for 15 years, then you don't have to pay the money back. It's their way to make sure that you use the money appropriately. But because it's termed as a loan, we have to go through what's known as a borrowing process. So what it is we go out, borrow the money, get the money from the federal government to pay ourselves back, but we have to do it all on the up and up, right? Even though in the end it truly is a grant. This is the process, and so we need to go through a consultation process with our citizens.
So it's not just a procedure, but it's actually a fact that you have to borrow the money from somebody else and then pay back when the federal government pays you?
Well, technically the way it happens is the loan gets registered against the property, and so then it becomes a debt owing, and it's a legal debt owing that's registered against the property, and we own it. Therefore, because it's a debt owing, we have to go through this process. So to a certain extent, it's a little bit technical knowing that the federal government's money is going to be there, but under the municipal charter, which governs how city goes, it's our responsibility to make sure that even in the worst case scenario, citizens need to know that we're encumbering, we're basically putting a lien against our own property mortgage to pay for this.
Okay. But the actual loan, does it happen that you have to go to a bank and borrow that, and then you pay it back with the money from the federal government, or it's just on paper and there is no real borrowing from a bank?
Sort of in the middle. We have enough reserves to do it. What happens is every 3 months or 6 months, we pay it out of our reserves. Okay. Every 6 months we give a temporary bill to the federal government, who then advances money until it's all gone.
So since there is no real borrowing from ourselves.
We're borrowing from ourselves. We're borrowing from ourselves and paying ourselves back to our federal contributions.
So you still have to follow the rule.
Yeah.
Okay. And what is the difficulty with it?
Well, we're excited that we got the money from the federal government. We've been trying to get the federal government back into affordable housing, dealing with homelessness. So as a city, to get that money in, that really helps us deal with our homelessness issue. We also got $3 million for the project from the provincial government, and all the local municipalities through the capital region has kicked in. So there isn't a problem with it other than, it keeps our lawyers busy.
We are here at Victoria City Hall with Lisa Helps, who is a new city councillor here. And you've been talking about participatory budgets, referring specifically in Calgary. Apparently they had 23,000 or so people participating. Mm-hmm. And you had some comments for the paper the other day about how we could probably benefit from it.
So yes, Calgary has done some interesting participatory budgeting stuff.
The fact that some people participate in it, I heard a little bit of reluctance from your part saying there is a misguided kind of participatory budget because they're basically given the answers, not the questions. Can you comment on that?
Well, yeah, I think that's the exact wrong way to go about it, to give people the answers instead of asking the questions. The reason that I'm such a strong advocate for participatory budgeting and a true kind of democratic process is because I think that we haven't been doing that and we've been getting the wrong answers. We keep digging ourselves deeper and deeper into an infrastructure deficit, deeper and deeper into expanding operating costs. And so I think if we keep making the budget with the same old process, which is department heads going, getting budgeting instructions from councils, have a tax increase of only this, and they come back with their plans, then we've missed a really important part, which is the people who are paying for the services need to have a say in how their money is spent.
So is that how you feel that the 2011 participatory budget happened here in BC, in Victoria actually? I understand there was some participation, but is that what you saw happening?
Well, I wasn't around on council at the time. I think the mayor made an effort to go out to communities and explain this is what the budget is, this is how it works. But that's the inform piece, and that's, in my mind at least, a good step, but not nearly far enough. I think we need to reverse the process. What the mayor did, and again, it's a great start, is went out and said, here's the budget, this is what we're planning, this is how the city's budget works, this is how your tax dollars are spent. I think before we even get to the budgeting process, so the budgeting process for the following year begins in the summer of the previous year. So in June or July, the department heads are given their budgeting instructions and they go away and do some work and come back with some budgets by September. Then that goes to the city manager and so on. So I think what we need to do at the same time as the department heads get their budgeting instructions, so too do citizens get their budgeting instructions and say, these are the constraints, this is what we have to go on, and what do you think? You know, and my favorite example is, this is really simple, but people will say, I want the pothole on my street fixed. There's potholes everywhere on my street. And then we need to say, okay, well, would you rather have the potholes on your street fixed, or, for example, more bike lanes going up Fort Street? So those are real choices that we need to make. That's just a simple example, but it's those kinds of things that I'm really interested in getting citizen input on.
So what are you going to do this summer coming up to address that issue?
Well, the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm working with two councillors from Saanich, Judy Brownoff and Dean Murdoch, and what we're going to do after this budgeting process is finished, because 2012 is well in the works, and there's I'm asking people for input on the 2012 budget, but really just in kind of a haphazard kind of way. But as soon as we're finished with this budget, what the councillors from Saanich and I are going to do, with some support hopefully from the Columbia Institute, is hold an open house and say to people, how do you want to be asked? What are some ways that you would like to give us input into the budget? And then once we get that input on the how, then we can go back to our respective municipalities and start building with staff and with fellow councillors a process of engagement for the budget.
And perhaps the citizens should have a very clear view of exactly what the taxes are and how the city is spending that. Because the citizens might decide to increase their taxes if they recognize that the need for that expense is really something that's going to benefit them. So it might not be a choice between covering potholes and bicycle lanes. It might be that they want both, and they want to pay for it. So you would actually have that input from people.
Absolutely. He said, Jerry Berry is the fellow's name, he said that every budgeting process should start by asking citizens, what is it that you want us to do with your tax dollars, and what are you willing to pay for?
And how are we going to ask the citizens about that?
Well, I think that's the unknown piece at this point. There are lots of different ways to engage. I mean, Calgary did a really, really extensive process. I think their budget for their participatory budgeting was $1.5 million. Now, we don't have that kind of money in the city of Victoria. But one thing that I have put forward, so the Union of BC Municipalities is, as you know, the governing body for all municipalities in British Columbia. And I've put forward a motion for the UBCM, which isn't held until September, to ask the UBCM to create a very simple online tool for use by municipalities for the purposes of participatory budgeting. Now, I don't think it's enough to do a web survey and say, hey, come on in, tell us what you want, and then that's enough information. But I think, again, it's a start.
Could the city of Victoria do that without waiting for all the municipalities of the province to agree with it?
Yeah, they certainly could, but the great thing about my motion is that if the UBCM agrees, the motion says that UBCM will pay for the creation or licensing of a software tool for use by all municipalities. So I think the first step is to say, hey, UBCM, will you pay for this? And if they say no, I think it's very positive. There's lots of interest in participatory budgeting. But if they say no, then the City of Victoria could come back and say, okay, well, we'll create or find our own tool, our own online tool.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of polling sites. One of them is nowpolling.ca. I don't know if you've heard about it, but nowpolling.ca cost about $500, the software to develop it. Now I presume that it would have to be a lot more secure to identify who the participants are and all that. But I'm sure that you have a whole department here on electoral policies. And is it the legislative and electoral department here who conducts the elections every 3 years or so? They could develop a system online and place a computer in a public library.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people can just go with a little card similar to the public library, which is an identification, and choose a set of questions or topics that are to their interest, and participate in that plebiscite, if you want. It wouldn't be a referendum, but just a non-binding plebiscite for city councillors to find out where the public stands. I don't think that would cost $1.5 million.
No, I don't think so either. No, I mean, the reason that Calgary's process cost so much is because it was very similar to what we did here in Victoria with the official community plan, which was a really big, extensive engagement process that involved everything from, they were called community circles. So there were people got workbooks, and then they'd gather their neighbors together in their living room and choose a topic and answer a question and then give that back to the city. So everything from that to weekend-long forums to ask people, what is your vision for the city for the next 30 years?
The alternative process is rather asking the people how to proceed.
So part of what the charter requires is that you consult with your residents. So you can either do that through a full referendum process, which is like a general election. It costs you around $150,000 to $200,000 to hold that process, and then people will come in and vote on whether they want to do this route. Or on something that's fairly small, or if there's something that needs to be done in a timely way, you can do a process that's known as the alternative approval process. Essentially says if less than, no more than 10%, if 10% of the people sign a form, then you have to go to full referendum. But the goal on this one is to everybody understand that it's a forgivable loan from the federal government to create affordable housing. So good cause, no risk. Let's get her done.
So you would rather if people didn't, that 10% of people didn't ask for a referendum because it would be too expensive, is that it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny that we'd spend $200,000 asking if we could borrow $1.8 million. That it sort of defeats the purpose, right? Almost 10%.
In New York, I think that March 28th and 29th, there's the first international conference on participatory budgeting focused specifically on taking models from Brazil and elsewhere and bringing them to North America. So again, I love when we think we know best in North America all the time, right? And I love when we look around the world and say, wow, that's a really innovative piece of engagement that we can bring here. The Brazilian model is great.
It's our mentality that we endorse everything to the politicians, and when the politicians don't do it right, then we blame them.
Yeah.
And instead of saying, but we haven't discussed that.
Exactly.
And that would be better for the people because their input comes in, and also better for the politicians because the responsibility is not all on your shoulders.
Well, exactly. And also we've got the information then through these conversations to make good decisions.
So then people cannot blame you and say, you made the wrong decision.
Exactly.
Because you can say, but that's what And the poll you said you would like.
That's right. Yeah, I think that for cities for the future, what we need to do is co-design. We need to co-design the process, and we need to co-design our cities. Because if we don't co-design, then like you say, the politicians just get blamed. But worse yet, if we don't do anything, then we just react and, move towards the future in a position of default and reaction rather than co-design and forward-looking and purposeful work.
Another point that you raised is transparency. Do you think that there's not enough information about some issues, some businesses the city council is, in general city councils, not specifically Victoria, but in general, city councils do make decisions behind closed doors, which seems not very transparent. Would you like to improve that too?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I'm working on as we speak, well, not right now because we're speaking, but I'm working on developing an open council policy, because there are reasons that city council has to go behind closed doors, land, labor, and law. So if we're negotiating the sale of a piece of land that could harm the city's interest, and not necessarily the city of the corporation of the City of Victoria, but the public interest, if that could be harmed, if we're negotiating a labor contract, or if we're getting legal advice from our solicitor, those three things must be in camera according to the community charter. But then there are a whole other range of issues where we may move in camera, and I think that we need to use much more discretion about going into camera or into closed session when we don't necessarily have to. And I think in part it's a lack, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, but I think it's a lack of courage and a lack of a desire to take risks and have hard discussions in public.
You also mentioned that the city is in dire straits, meaning there is not enough money for all the projects that we need.
Yeah.
Why is that we're in dire strait?
There are a number of reasons, but one of the key ones in my mind is that the property tax system that we've been using for the last 200 years is really, really out of date. And it's not, so the municipalities in British Columbia get 92% of their revenue from property taxes. And when property taxing started 200 years ago, the assumption was that if you had a large house, you were wealthier, and if you had a large house, you consumed more services, right? And now that system of taxation hasn't changed in 200 years, but we well know that if someone has a large house, it could be because they bought it in 1950 and they're now 90 years old, and the value of the house has increased, but it bears no relation to the person's ability to pay. So one of the reasons we're in dire straits is because cities don't have the right kind of taxation power and revenue generating power to provide the kinds of services that they need and to take care of our infrastructure in the way that we need. So that's one reason. I've got another one, but you've got a question.
No, I was just thinking, what can we do about it?
Well, one thing that we can do is not just keep asking the federal and provincial governments for handouts and grants. We can say, hey, you are downloading services to us, and property taxation is no longer, and maybe arguably never has been, an adequate way of providing what cities need to provide. So we want new taxing powers. We want consumption taxing powers. So for example, roads are a perfect example. People can drive their cars on roads for free, but it's not free. The cities need to pay, so there needs to be a way to correspond the use of something like roads, that's the easiest example, to taxing that.
That could be done through ICBC.
There are a whole series of ways that it could be done.
Gasoline taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
There was the big debate every year between businesses and property taxes. And there has been this shift from business taxes to property taxes. What's happening this year here in Victoria? Are they continue to shift, or they're freezing it, or what's happening with that balance between businesses paying their share and property owners paying their share?
That's a question that I can't answer at that point because we're still in budget deliberations, so nothing is concrete. I know that the Chamber has been putting lots of pressure on the city to equalize that balance, and I think I mean, one of the things that I think makes any city great is the downtown and the core. And one of the reasons that I ran for council, and one of the things that really distresses me, is to see increasingly vacant storefronts on Yates, on Fort, on Government, on Douglas. And one of the reasons is because property taxes are so high for commercial enterprises, and then that drives business out.
So you mean the property taxes from commercial buildings?
Yeah.
Not necessarily the business taxes.
Exactly, that's right. So because when property taxes are increased on commercial buildings, then that gets passed on through rent increases to the business owner.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that businesses are going out of business because taxes are too high?
Yes, absolutely, because taxes go up and then the increase is passed on, like I said, to the business owner in terms of rent. And not only, and this is maybe a bit of a controversial concern, it's not only that businesses are going out of business or moving out of downtown, it's that multinational corporations like Burger King, for example, can afford to pay the high rents because of high property taxes on Douglas Street. So a new Burger King just opened up, or within the last 6 months, at Douglas and Johnson, right? Whereas further down at the very end of Store Street, there's a new local shop called Ingredients and Apple Cafe. And so if they had the same wherewithal as Burger King, then that would have been downtown. And in my mind, we need more Ingredients and less Burger Kings.
Now, the city council here is debating the expenditure on some, how to reduce their budgets by cutting services in some parks. I heard Belfour Park and Trent Street Gardens and planting 500 new trees and all those reducing flower beds in some parks and all those services that are part of the life of Victorians are being considered to be easier to reduce than to increase taxes or shift budgets from other departments. What do you think about it?
I think that is the exact reason that participatory budgeting is so necessary, because we may find out that actually people love the flower beds and they're willing to pay more taxes to have beautiful flower beds. Or we may find out the majority of people are like, you know what, I don't care about flower beds right now. What we really need to do is fix our fire hall and our pool. So that exact example that you pointed to, that's why we need a different engagement process when it comes to the budget, so we can find out these things, because otherwise we're just operating in a vacuum, and that vacuum is the past. That vacuum is the way things have always been done. I think direct democracy comes when people care about the places that they live. So I think that direct democracy, for example, at the federal level doesn't necessarily work, at the provincial level doesn't necessarily work. But I think if cities become the site of power and cities become the place where people live and work and play and connect with others and build their homes and their families and their businesses, there's more. I think direct democracy has to be place-based, and I think if we let go of the past 200 years, the arrangement between city, province, and government, or federal government rather, hasn't changed since 1867. Yet the world around us has fundamentally changed. So I'm hopeful about direct democracy, but I think it has to happen at the level of the local.
In 1867, we didn't have computers.
Yeah.
We didn't have internet.
We didn't have climate change. We didn't have any of the things that perplex us now. And yet we still have that very old arrangement of power.
That's right. So technologically we have changed, but politically we're stuck in the same system.
Politically we're stuck in the same system, and taxation-wise we're stuck in the same system.
So how would you change taxation?
Well, I think that cities need. We've talked about this already a little bit. I think that cities need more taxation power, or more transfer of income tax revenue from the senior levels of government to the municipalities in order to carry out our business.
So what would the federal government should reduce in order to give more of the taxes to the provinces.
Yeah, okay, well, never mind the federal government. The best example I can think of right now is BC Housing, right? BC Housing is part of the provincial government. And I think disband BC Housing and give the money directly for housing, for affordable housing, to the municipalities or the regional district to I don't think that cities should be doing affordable housing, but I think that in every municipality and region there are housing providers. In our region there's Kool-Aid, there's Pacifica, there are Fernwood Energy, there are a number. And then you cut out a level of provincial bureaucracy. You empower the local cities to deal with the problems that they have, and you give them money to do it. So simple things like that are kind of, I don't know if it's going to happen. There needs to be a shift in political will, and there needs to be a real belief in the capacity of municipalities and their nonprofit partners to carry these things out. So that's just one example.
Do you have 1 minute to tell us a little bit about some land that the city might own and would be possibilities perhaps in the future to build some more social housing? Is that in the books and planning?
Well, it's always in something that we look at is there some land that we can put on the table that will attract investment from senior levels of government, either the province or the federal government, to create affordable housing, whether it be for the hard to house, whether it be for families, whether it be for seniors. It's something that cities can contribute to try and bring that investment in. So we always take a look at that to see if there's something out there. I mean, it's pretty
something like what, land?
Yeah. So right now but right now we're having a great fortune with a lot of nonprofit housing societies who have their own land that they're putting it up. So right now we're trying to get all of that land into play through those nonprofits. And when we need to, we'll take another look at our land. We did that with the emergency shelter, the new emergency shelter on Alice Street. There was an old park that was disused. And so we allowed them to build a new emergency shelter there.
People always claim that you're doing all right, but it's not enough. They want more.
Yeah, and if I had all the money in the world, I'd solve every problem. But we're having great luck, and and great fortune in getting work done. Like I said, we have housed more than 1,500 people over the last 3 years. We have created more than 800 units of housing, and we're going to keep going. Our goal is to end homelessness in 10 years. We're 3 years in, so we got 7 more years, and we'll make it so that anybody in Victoria who needs one has a home. We're not going to end poverty. We're not going to end mental health or addictions. Those are very large challenges. But we know to deal with all of those issues, if you're in a house, you can do a much better job. So it's our goal, and we'll get her done.
So the goal is not to end poverty?
I don't think we can end poverty as a city. That's more of a federal goal. But in the interim, I know that if I can get people housed in good quality housing, that it makes their quality of life better. Right?
Well, I don't know if that's right. The project of ending poverty, I think it's everybody's project. So money is there. We have money. We just there's the priorities that count. Where do we spend that money?
Exactly.
So I don't believe that there's shortage of money.
Because I'm heading up to my budget meeting.